Have you ever wondered why that evening glass of wine feels almost impossible to skip? Is it a habit, stress relief, or something deeper? A quiet coping mechanism wrapped in cultural approval. If you feel like you're lacking a sense of control over your drinking habits, or you're wondering what alcohol is really doing to your health, this is the episode for you. Welcome to All About You. I'm Dr. Shauna Watts, GP and women's health advocate. Every week, I share evidence-based conversations that help you navigate the changes of midlife with clarity and confidence. Today, we're talking about alcohol, the emotional, social, and cultural layers that keep many of us reaching for a glass, even when part of us wants to stop. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why so many women find themselves drinking more than they'd like to in midlife, the emotional and physical toll of grey area drinking, and how to begin reducing alcohol or support someone who is without judgment or shame. Remember, this is general information only, not personal medical advice. Always consult your own healthcare provider for guidance. My guest today is Sarah Rusbatch, a certified grey area drinking coach, keynote speaker, and the author of the best-selling book Beyond Booze: How to Create a Life You Love Without Alcohol. After her own turning point in 2019, when just a few glasses to unwind became something harder to control, Sarah made the brave decision to stop drinking, and in doing so fulfilled a calmer, clearer, far more fulfilling life than she'd ever imagined possible. Today, she helps women all over the world do the same, understand the why behind their drinking, find freedom from guilt and shame, and rebuild their confidence, energy, and joy, one small change at a time. She's also a leading voice in the alcohol-free movement here in Australia, known for her compassionate approach and her ability to make difficult conversations feel hopeful and empowering. Sarah, welcome to the podcast. I'm so delighted to have you. I've absolutely loved your book, and I've got so many questions to ask you, so welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
You once described your drinking as socially acceptable self-medication. I'd love for you to explain what you meant by that. And can you share a little bit about what alcohol looked like in your own family and how you wound up pursuing a career as an alcohol coach with midlife women?
So I think the reason for me saying that was because if I was to put myself into any WhatsApp group around the world that has mothers of teenagers or little kids or whatever who are juggling work, life, aging parents, book week, home cooked meals, going to the gym, fitting in meditation, trying to have a sleep routine, all the things that we're meant to be juggling. And you go in there and you say in that group, I've had a terrible day, it's been awful, XYZ has happened. The very first response we often get is, I'll go home and have a glass of wine, you deserve it. Like, we have created this normalization of alcohol as being a completely acceptable form of self-care and a solution to pretty much any problem that women have in their lives. So I grew up in, first of all, in Scotland, and alcohol was very present in my house growing up. So mum and dad were very sociable. There were lots of dinner parties. There was lots of alcohol present, but never in a difficult way, very much in a, oh, that's what grown-ups do to have fun. That's what grown-ups do to have a good time. You know, it would be Robert Burns night and there'd be like loads of drunken men in kilts wandering around my house, laughing hilariously. And as a little girl, I would look at these adults in awe and be like, oh, yeah, I can't wait to be a grown-up and have all this fun that they seem to be having. Obviously, you don't realize that when you're 7 years old, but as an adult and all the work I've done on myself, I can kind of look back and go, probably at quite a young age, that's what you do as a grown-up to have fun. Those were the kind of connections that I had made. And I started drinking at the age of 14. By this point, we'd moved from Scotland to Manchester. And I mean, you will know, like, coming from Scotland to England, the rivalry that's there, I stuck out like a sore thumb. I had this really thick Scottish accent. I was suddenly thrust into this life with quite posh girls who were at this quite strict all-girls school, where I'd come from, like this local comprehensive where people were like doing heroin and having sex in the toilets at lunchtime. And then all of a sudden I was at this really posh school where the girls played lacrosse and hockey. And I just was like, I don't fit in here whatsoever. And at 14, when someone introduced alcohol to me, we would go down the local park. We would fill up SodaStream bottles with whatever we could find. And I remember thinking, this is great. This is what I've been looking for. I felt like I fitted in. I had confidence. I didn't feel like I was Sarah, the new girl. I didn't feel awkward. And then you start getting that feedback. Oh, you're so funny when you're drunk. You're hilarious when you're drunk. I love you. And as a girl that was just desperately trying to fit in, that was music to my ears. So I think very early on in my drinking, I made the association. I was fun, Sarah. People seemed to like me. I had this confidence that I didn't really have when I wasn't drinking. And alcohol then became my go-to in order to make friends, form connections, and have that great social life. And I had a big capacity for alcohol. I wasn't someone that had 2 drinks and then needed to switch to water. I had 2 drinks and I was like, right, that's the warm up. Let's get going now. And I didn't really get that many hangovers. I wasn't someone that would spend the day in bed vomiting. You know, we'd go to uni, we'd have all-nighters, and then I'd be in the pub the next day with the boys mostly, because the girls wouldn't be quite as hardcore as I was. And I was in the pub like having hair of the dog and keep going for the Sunday session. And I wore that drinking capacity as a badge of honor. This was the 90s. This was a time when it was girl power. There were lots of female role models that were out there saying, you know, women can have it all. We don't need to rely on men financially. We can, you know, and alcohol played a big part in that. And I think for me, when my drinking changed was I met my husband, we moved to Australia, and then I had 2 kids in very quick succession. And all of a sudden, I'd gone from living in London, having this high flying, very successful career with a great group of girlfriends. We were, you know, we just were living the dream. It was like Sex in the City in London, and we just had this really great lifestyle. And then I was in Perth with no friends, with no family, with no job, because I was a mum and I loved being a mum. But my days had now gone from, you know, cutting deals in investment banking to pureeing carrot, cleaning up baby sick, and going to monkey music. And I didn't really know who I was anymore. And alcohol seemed to be the solution for everything. And this was a real movement of mummy wine culture. This was a real time when alcohol was being presented as the solution to parenting for busy, stressed mums. And alcohol worked until it stopped working. And I'm sure we'll talk about that further down the line, but it stopped working for me. And I went down a little bit of a battle of trying to moderate my drinking, but realizing moderation was never going to work for me. And so in 2019, I had my last drink, so 6.5 years now. Then I realized that there were probably a lot of other women who were stuck in the same place that I was, where my drink, I didn't define myself as an alcoholic, but I knew that my drinking wasn't healthy either, and that it was really starting to impact my mental health, my physical health, my emotional well-being. And so I retrained to become a grey area drinking coach. And soon after I qualified, I did an interview with Mamma Mia. And the interview went live, and 8,000 women contacted me in 24 hours and said, "You've just told my story." And that was when I knew I was going to be a very busy lady for the next few years.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much. That's an incredible story. And so, whenever I'm in clinic talking to women, um, it's not, as you say, drinking for partying at this stage of life. It's that quiet glass of wine at the end of the day that's either to calm someone down because the day's been fraught and nerves are on edge, or it's to cheer someone up, or it's to celebrate something, or it's to commiserate something. Like it seems to be the bookend of whatever has happened. It's like, why don't you go home? And even, I know that even people have said it to me at times in life when it's been tricky. Why don't you go home, put your feet up and have a glass of wine? It seems to be the remedy that everyone suggests. And as you said, that time for you in Perth was obviously really difficult. You've emigrated, you're probably a little bit isolated, you've left this amazing Sex and the City gang behind you, and here you are. And so, what was the root of it? Like, was it loneliness? Um, was it stress? A bit of both? Or what do you think it was?
I think it was a bit of all of those things. I was really homesick. I was really lonely. And I was really confused with how I felt because on paper, I had everything I wanted. I had two beautiful, healthy boy and a girl children. We lived by the beach. We lived in Australia, for heaven's sake. It was something I'd always wanted all my life. I was able to take time off work because we'd saved enough money from the time in London to be able for me to be a full-time mum with the kids. So on paper, I had everything. And yet inside, I felt so confused about why I wasn't happier. And I felt guilty that I wasn't completely fulfilled and happy with what I had. But I can see now, like, I was desperately homesick. I think I had some postnatal depression. I was really lonely. I've always been a girl's girl. I've always been someone that has surrounded herself with really close girlfriends. I give a lot to my friends. We have close relationships. And I didn't have that anymore. And my husband, bless him, he's amazing, but he's not a truly emotional support like a girlfriend is, right? So I was spending all my time just on the phone to my friends in the UK, pining for real late life female friendship. But the only way I knew how to form connections really was through drinking. And I was now at home with two kids under 2. I was still breastfeeding. I was meeting women in mother's group, and I'd be like, "Oh, who wants to go to the pub this weekend?" And they would look at me like I was crazy because, of course, they didn't want to go to the pub. We all had newborn babies. We were breastfeeding, but it was almost like I didn't know how to form relationships without alcohol being at the heart of it. And so I think there was all of that going on. And then I think it became really habitual, where alcohol just becomes the thing that you turn to because it's really good at making us not have to feel. So once the kids did, go into kindy and daycare, and I set up my own recruitment business and I was working again, it then just became, instead of it blocking loneliness, it started to block the stress or the overwhelm or just the juggle. It was the thing that quietened the mind. And so we can make alcohol the solution for anything that we want. And I often say, and you'll have read it in my book, alcohol's not the problem. Alcohol's the solution for another problem, but we just don't know. We haven't identified that other problem. And then when the alcohol starts to become problematic, we think that alcohol was the problem, but it was always the solution. And I think if we ever want to successfully change our drinking, we need to identify, why was I drinking? What was it the solution for? Because then that gives me clues as to what I might need to change in my life if I want to change my drinking. And I'm sure we'll come on to talking about that later.
Yeah, 100%. And as you said, with friendships, both in Australia and in the UK, and I'm sure many places around the world, alcohol and female friendships have definitely become quite entwined together. It's that have a glass of bubbles with your friends, go for cocktails with your friends, have a glass of wine with your friends. And it seems like it definitely begins to become that thing that is cohesive for the group. And I always think back to this is a very Northern Irish thing, but if someone wasn't drinking and they were previously a drinker, people would ask, were you on antibiotics or pregnant? So it's like that was the only reasonable excuse you would have, is then that you were taking antibiotics or you were pregnant, and those were the two reasonable reasons why you wouldn't be drinking. I do think it is obviously quite a cultural thing as well. What do you think about sort of the Australian culture around alcohol and the Australian culture around friendships and female friendships and drinking?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to the UK. I think we have started doing the alcohol company's marketing job for them. Like I think they had a great campaign when they launched it to start getting women to drink more, and I think it's worked. And we have now associated female friendship with winding down, with having alcohol, and with having that period of time where you get to, you don't have to think about your mum duties, you don't have to think about your work duties, you don't have to think about your wife duties. You then associate alcohol with fun, with switching off from all of those things, and it's really intertwined in our identity as well and how we see ourselves. And there's so much of that to unpack when we do start thinking about changing our relationship with alcohol.
And what emotional needs do you think it is that women are actually trying to meet when they are drinking that they're missing out on? Is it do you think it is just literally switching off from the huge mental load, or is it relaxation or connection or something else that you think that you've been able to dig deeper to?
Yeah, I am. So I've got a community of 25,000 women, and I asked them, why do you drink? And the three biggest responses, they probably didn't surprise me, but it was quite seeing that all the replies coming in thick and fast. It was boredom, stress, and loneliness.
Oh, boredom. Okay, yeah, that's so interesting.
And I think boredom is because we're knackered and we don't have a huge amount of time. But when we do have time, we don't know what to do with it because we've kind of been giving so much of ourselves to our family, to our kids, to aging parents, to our jobs. So then we have some time and we don't know how to spend it. So we drink because we know that that just shuts everything off for a bit. So you've got the boredom, you've got the stress because we know, like, show me a midlife woman who isn't experiencing some stress in her life. And then we've got loneliness because we are starved so often of that real deep, authentic connection in the modern world. And those are the three biggest reasons that I see that women are drinking.
And that authentic connection, do you think that's because I mean, and I'm definitely guilty of this, sitting on the sofa and just the TV's on, but I'm still on my phone, kind of doom scrolling on social media. And sometimes I feel like, God, I'm too exhausted or mentally tired to pick up the phone and have a phone conversation with someone. So instead of actually having a real interaction, I'm watching some cat video, to be honest.
Totally, totally. And like, do you remember when you just used to phone someone for a chat and they would just pick up the phone and answer and you just had all the time in the world just to have a chat with one of your best mates? And now, like, you have to plan it 3 weeks in advance. Are you free on this day at this time? And I'll call you, but I've only got 20 minutes, but it would just be nice to hear your voice. And just the modern world's just got so fast and so busy. And there just doesn't seem to be these gaps that we used to have. And now we're just filling those gaps with scrolling and drinking.
Yeah, it's funny. I read a thing recently and it was saying that women as groups of friends, we're not making fun memories. We're not going off and doing activities or having really memorable times. We kind of finally find a date in the diary that 4 or 5 friends can actually and then people literally just take it in turns to download and fill everybody in and all the things that have happened, the good, the bad, and the in between. And then, before you know it, people have to go and pick up various teenagers or whatever, run off to do something. And it's kind of like, yes, you've met up with your friends, but there's kind of not like, fun memories were had or activities have taken place. So it's just been this kind of meet up, catch up, wind up of what you've been doing, have a glass of wine, and off you go again. And you kind of have to wonder where that leaves us all.
Absolutely. And I think that, every time I look around at groups of friends when there is catch-up times, that's what it is. And I think that that's something that's really changed for me since stopping drinking has been because I don't want to go and sit in a pub and watch everyone else get pissed or like, listen to everyone moaning. I'm actually more interested in going and doing fun activities. Like I went line dancing. Let me tell you, on Friday night, I went line dancing for the night and with a group of friends. It was so much fun. And we just laughed so much all night. And so I think that alcohol does hold us back from having some of those new experiences because we just stay stuck in what we've always done, which is generally going to a wine bar or a restaurant, going around the table, bitching and moaning about everything that's happening that we're pissed off with in our life and drinking while we do it. And then we go home and do it all over again a month later. And yeah, it's interesting reflection actually that you share that we've stopped having fun because I definitely see that a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you've got this incredible online community and you obviously have worked with women all around the world. I'd love to understand what impact does it have of the example that your parents showed around drinking? Do you feel like there's a pattern around that? Like if parents were heavy drinkers, does that turn people off drinking, or are they much more likely to drink, and vice versa? Or if parents were teetotals, is that more likely to make people feel like they're going to go the opposite way? I'd love to know what your kind of lived experience has been with that.
So I find when drinking has been hugely problematic in a child's home, with a parent being a very severe alcoholic, where alcohol use has been, really impactful on that child's life, I often see it goes one of two ways. Either the trauma that they've experienced as a child from growing up in that house has meant that they have developed alcohol use disorder themselves, or they never want to touch a drink ever because of that. So I see in that extremity. When I see what most grey area drinkers seem to experience, which is like what I had, where yes, there was a lot of drinking, but it was not like my dad and mum, they were very sociable, but they weren't like drinking on their own at home every night or anything like that. It was a weekend thing. It was done in connection with other people as a fun thing. It certainly wasn't modeled to me, or that's what, certainly from my mum anyway. Like, I don't think women were drinking back then in the same way that women drink now, of, oh, I've had a busy, stressful day. I need to, I deserve that glass of wine. But I do think that for so many of, obviously the women I work with, they're children of the 70s and 80s, well, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I do think that that was a time where alcohol was quite present in many houses growing up, from that social fun perspective. And monkey see, monkey do, like there's new research out of Sweden actually that says from the age of 2, a toddler can tell whether the drink their parent is consuming is alcoholic or not, and in what circumstances that drink is likely to be consumed, when they're more likely to have alcohol. So they are creating those associations. Or when dad watches football, he drinks beer. When mum's with Auntie Kath, she drinks wine. And kids, toddlers, make those associations at such a young age.
Wow, that is incredible. I'm actually quite shocked at that. And so, whenever we think what we're being told, or what you and I are really chatting about here, is that alcohol is being portrayed as self care in a way, which, when you think about it, is kind of crazy because it, like, by all definitions, it is a poison. And, we know that it causes so many health conditions. And, I know that you work with women in perimenopause and menopause, as do I. And it's interesting for me because, as an example, so many women will come in with a great fear of starting hormones because they're worried about the risk of breast cancer. But in the next breath, they'll tell me that they drink, half to one bottle of wine or more per night. But they don't actually see that as a connection. And it is very interesting how somehow it's like alcohol's been given a get out of jail free card, and that, smoking has definitely, like, everyone can tell you that smoking causes lung cancer. But people are quite surprised when I tell them that, alcohol, for example, with breast cancer is actually a very high risk factor thing to do, and increases your risk of breast cancer quite significantly. But people are really surprised that they haven't really heard that. And it's interesting how not only has alcohol not been portrayed as a poison, but it has actually been portrayed as being a self-care, which
It
is
drives me mad.
very,
Yeah.
very interesting.
There's a research come out of a Melbourne university that shows 80% of women in Australia, and there's a similar study in the UK actually, are unaware that there's a link between alcohol and breast cancer. So that means only 20% of women know that. Those that do know it think that you have to be drinking significant amounts of alcohol to be at risk. But the latest research shows 3 units or more of alcohol per week starts to increase our chance of developing breast cancer. And the more you drink, the higher that chance is. Now, I did an interview with a doctor just last week, actually, because I'm running a women's alcohol-free challenge at the moment. And she shared stats that I didn't know. So 14 units or more a week is considered a heavy drinker. Now, 14 units or more a week, 14 units is 1.5 bottles of wine over a week. Now, I could do that in a night. Like, that was a fairly decent night for me, but 1.5 bottles, like, easily I could do, and then still get up in the morning, go to the gym and be high functioning. And over a week, that's considered heavy drinking, and you increase your chance of developing one of the alcohol-related cancers to 1 in 20. When that jumps to 21 units a week or more, so that's about 2 bottles of wine a week, your chance of developing alcohol-related cancers with the real high significance for breast cancer for women jumps to 40% compared to someone who doesn't drink. And the latest research is showing 37% of hormone-positive breast cancers are caused by alcohol. And yet, just this week, there's a gym in Australia promoting Prosecco and Pilates to raise money for breast cancer, where you get given Prosecco when you do your Pilates and you pay money to do that so they can give money to breast cancer research. It's bonkers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like we need to press the reset button. How do you think gender roles in society as they stand at the minute are feeding into this reliance of women on alcohol to kind of get through it?
I think that there's no doubting the pressure and the stress that women are under. Gabor Mate said on a podcast that I heard last year, it's the most hardest and stressful and difficult time to be a mother since the Second World War, just in terms of what women are now juggling, in terms of we have taken on way more in terms of, working and being financially, adding to the family home, but also there hasn't been a drop in what women's responsibilities and roles are when it comes to work, everything that needs to be done in the home. And so as a result of that, women are just so stressed. They feel like they're being pulled in every direction possible. And then alcohol is coming in as a way to provide that solution. Anne Dowsett Johnson, who's a medical journalist from Canada, wrote a book that was really interesting. And she said the research shows men are more likely, this is just a generalization, not always, but men are more likely to drink to enhance a good time. And women are more likely to drink to escape and to seek oblivion.
And when I think of, I'm just thinking of a patient I saw today, who described to me, she's 55, comes home from work, kicks her shoes off, starts to cook dinner, trying to navigate, getting teenagers who are older to do what she needs them to do in terms of get dinner. And she's like, the only way I can kind of switch off from drama of kids fighting and arguing with each other or a stressful day at work is, she's like, as soon as I go and I kick my shoes off and I open a bottle of wine immediately, you have to think, what is she looking for? Some kind of relief? Because yeah, it's like the expectation is just too much. It's like, I don't know. It's like we were told we could have everything, but was it actually you have to do everything rather than have everything?
Absolutely. And we're drowning. And the thing with alcohol is there's no denying it provides a short-term solution. We're not stupid. We wouldn't keep doing something that ends up causing us, crap sleep, increased anxiety, all of those things if it didn't work in the short term. And alcohol gives us a GABA response, which means that we instantly start to feel calmer and more relaxed after we've had a drink. And that lasts for about 20 minutes. And our brain doesn't think long term, our brain thinks short term. And if we are stressed and the brain sees that as being threat to survival, not just, the kids are arguing, I haven't taken the chicken out of the freezer, I've got 400 unread emails and I've got to make sure I get the dog to the vet this week. And, all the things that are in your head, your brain doesn't know actually your life's not in danger. Your brain's going, oh, she's in the fight or flight response. I've got to find a way to get her out of this. What worked in the past are alcohol. Because alcohol is a depressant to the central nervous system. So it does actually bring us down short term. The problem is long term, it's a terrible solution because it causes so many more issues. And throw that in the mix with a woman in perimenopause and the hormonal changes, and it just gets even worse.
Ladies, are you feeling flat, foggy, or like you've lost touch with who you used to be? Well, it's time to rediscover you. After 25 plus years as a doctor working with women as a GP, an aesthetic doctor, and in women's health, I've created the 16-week Rediscover You program to help you reclaim your energy, confidence, and vitality. This guided evidence-based journey is specifically designed to support you through the perimenopause and menopause. Together, we'll reset your hormones, boost your energy levels, create sustainable weight management, and restore the clarity and glow you deserve. We'll take a deep dive into what's really happening inside your body, from hormonal shifts and skin changes to disrupted sleep patterns and mood swings. You'll get the tools and understanding to navigate the powerful transition with confidence, clarity, and care, because you deserve to feel like you again. Our waitlist is now open. Click the link in the show notes to save your place. You talk about grey area drinking, and I know there will be people listening thinking, well, I don't have alcoholism, or I'm not, vomiting, and I'm not drinking vodka out of, in the bathroom secretly in the morning. Can you explain to the listeners what is grey area drinking, and why is it potentially more of a problem than people think?
So grey area drinking describes the place between someone who's an every now and then drinker, so someone who maybe or doesn't drink at all, and someone who has end stage physical dependence on alcohol and needs medical support to safely withdraw. So if we were to think about that in the scale of a 1 to a 10, 1 is someone that maybe has a glass of champagne at a wedding once a year, otherwise they don't think about alcohol. 10 is someone, they're drinking daily, they're probably moved on to hard liquor that they're drinking daily. They need to have medical support to safely withdraw from alcohol, because alcohol is one of only 3 substances that the human body can die from withdrawal from. Not many people in our modern Western world are a 1 or a 10. Grey area drinking describes about a 4 to an 8 on that scale. We've got past the point of being a take it or leave it drinker. We've started to use alcohol as a solution to something. But we're not yet at the point where we're physically dependent. We can go a few days. We probably don't drink every day. We don't drink in the morning. We're still holding down our jobs. On the outside, no one thinks we've got a problem. And the majority of women I work with, if not all of them, are in that grey area. And that's where I was for years. But because I didn't define myself as an alcoholic, I didn't know where to go to get help and support, because I would Google, am I an alcoholic? And all the things that came up, it was like, well, no, I don't tick the box for any of those. And yet I couldn't create long-term change to my drinking. I think that's one of the key signs. Is but some of the warning signs for me were I started to get really bad anxiety. I've never had anxiety in my life. I remember going to my GP and I was crying and I was saying to her, I'm a shell of the woman I used to be. I've lost my confidence. I'm overthinking everything. And at no point did she say the question come up about alcohol. Nothing. She gave me a prescription for anti-anxiety meds, which I know should not have been consumed drinking the amount that I was drinking. But didn't come up around alcohol. So anxiety is a sign. Sleep is another one. We get to that point where alcohol's starting to really disrupt our sleep. We're waking up at 2, 3 in the morning. We can't get back to sleep. We might be starting to notice that we don't look forward to things that don't involve drinking. And like my whole thing would be, oh God, well, if I can't drink, there's no point going. Like I remember my daughter started playing water polo and it was on a Friday night. And like Friday, who doesn't drink on a Friday, right? Like Friday is like free permission to just go and drink as much as you want. And I was like, that means I've got to drive her to water polo on a Friday night at 6 o'clock and I'm not going to get home till 7. I was furious. Like, honestly, like I was so pissed off that I was going to have to delay my Friday night drinking. If someone's not a grey area drinker, they don't care. They're just like, oh yeah, whatever. Whereas for me, it was interrupting my drinking. And, some of the signs that you're a grey area drinker would include you often drink more than you intend to. I'm just going to have one, often becomes more. You make rules around your drinking, but then you often find a reason to justify breaking your rules. So it might be, oh, I don't drink Monday to Thursday. And then it's Wednesday and you really fancy a drink. So then this chatter starts in your mind. Oh, I said I wasn't going to drink. I was going to be really good this week. I said I wasn't going to drink. It's Wednesday. Well, maybe I won't drink Friday. So if I have Friday's drinks tonight, then that's okay because I'm still drinking. And there's just this constant negotiation and justification that's going on. Whereas people who are not grey area drinkers, alcohol doesn't take up any headspace in their brain. They're just like, do I want to drink? Do I not want to drink? Yeah, don't care. I remember talking to a friend about it and I was going, So what, you're not sat there pissed off that that waiter over there hasn't topped up your glass and he's only topped up my glass and not yours? Because if that was me and it was the other way around, I'd be furious. And she's like, oh, did you not top up my glass? And I was just like, because for me, I'd be eyeing the waiter. I used to hate restaurants where the waiter would top up your glass and you didn't have the ownership of the bottle to do it yourself. And that's grey area drinking. We've started to rely on it. We might be turning to it when we're stressed, when we're angry, when we've had an argument with our husband, when the kids are driving us nuts. Like whatever the reason is, our go-to solution is, I'll have a drink and that makes me feel better. And if we're turning to the point where we're using alcohol to make us feel a different way because we don't want to feel the way that we've been feeling, we're in the grey area.
So what I'm hearing you saying is grey area drinking. It's not someone rock bottom who's not functioning. It's probably the woman who's potentially drinking that bottle of wine at night and has looked forward to it probably for part of the day, but then might just hop out of bed the next morning and go for that 5K run. And that kind of somehow justifies it because she feels she's like burning off the calories and thinks to herself, well, I don't really have a problem because I still manage to get up and go to the gym every morning and I still manage to do everything.
Absolutely. And like, there is, people always say to me, what's the number? So how much were you drinking? Like they want to know what's the number so that they know whether they need to change their drinking or not. And I'm like, it's not about a number, it's about a feeling. So it's about starting to notice, well, has my tolerance increased? So what used to be a glass is now a bottle. If I can get up in the morning and run 5K after a bottle of wine, I'm a grey area drinker because a bottle of wine is 10 units. A woman in Australia is recommended not to have more than 10 units over the course of a week. If we can drink that in one sitting, then we're probably a grey area. I got a message from a woman saying, I drink a bottle of wine most nights. I feel fine the next day. I go to the gym. I have a full-time job. It doesn't really seem to impact me. Do I have a problem? And I'm like, well, that's probably 70 units of alcohol per week. The recommended is 10. And the thing is that we get used to feeling 5 out of 10. So while we're not vomiting and we're not in bed with a terrible hangover and we're not like hiding behind our desk with, like hoping our boss doesn't spot us and that we can just get through the day, like we do build tolerance. And so for so many women, just because you can drink a bottle of wine doesn't mean you should drink a bottle of wine. And I say grey area drinking is generally anything that's above 14 units of alcohol per week, or when you've started to notice that alcohol's impacting your sleep, your mood, your mindset, your anxiety, your skin, your weight, your relationships. And most people don't know that they're feeling 5 out of 10 because they actually don't have anything to compare it to. And that's where it can always be about starting with curiosity to go, maybe I'll do a month off booze just as a reference point to see how it actually feels compared to how I feel most days.
Exactly. And you touched on something there that I think is so interesting because we obviously work with a similar group of women. And one of the things that I see is women's really struggling with sleep. In fact, it's probably one of the biggest issues, and it's probably one of the things that I prioritize, certainly as a doctor, to try and get women sleeping again. Because I think whenever you're sleeping, it just changes the trajectory of so many aspects, physically and mentally. But what I also notice is two things. One, a lot of women actually think that alcohol will help them get to sleep. And it probably maybe helps you fall asleep, but what I find is that it's waking you up, and that I would say like 2:18 or 2:44 you're bing wide awake and usually not feeling great. Do we know why that is? Why does alcohol suddenly seem to wake a middle-aged woman up where maybe if she had drunk before she would have slept right through?
And I think there's a couple of things there. So yes, alcohol might, because it has such a sedative effect on the brain and the body, we might pass out and fall asleep easier. But as Matthew Walker, the sleep specialist, says, sedation is not restorative sleep. And so while you might be passed out, you're not getting the benefits of a good night's sleep. Second thing is alcohol causes our cortisol to rise, which is the stress hormone, in response to the big surge of GABA that's been created by the alcohol. So we drink alcohol. There's a neurotransmitter called GABA, which is our calming, our relaxing neurotransmitter. As we age, women produce less GABA because of the drop in progesterone, and GABA and progesterone are linked. So we're feeling more stressed and anxious. The GABA response we get from alcohol causes us to unwind and relax in that moment. The brain doesn't like having such a big surge of GABA in one go, so it releases the opposing neurotransmitter cortisol in response to try and create some balance. And then also the alcohol's got the sugar in. So what tends to happen by the time it gets to your circadian rhythm, the time that is working on your liver is usually between 2 and 4 a.m., where your liver is processing the alcohol, processing the sugar. You've got more circulating cortisol, the stress hormone, and that's why we will often wake up. And then we will find from there that we'll have very fragmented sleep and really struggle to get back into a deep restorative sleep. And we also know that alcohol prevents us from getting any REM sleep. And REM sleep is the stage of sleep that's associated with dreaming, but also responsible for emotional processing. They've done studies on people, even after one drink, just one glass of wine, they've studied their brain while they're sleeping. When we have, let's say we have 6 sleep cycles in one night of sleep, only one of those after alcohol will go into REM sleep and the other 5 bypass it. So if REM sleep is responsible for our emotional regulation and emotional processing, then again, that makes sense why we have, consistent drinkers, not heavy drinkers, but consistent drinkers will start to find that their mood and general mental well-being starts to deteriorate. And we just feel tired. Like the background vocabulary to my life was, I'm not hungover, I'm just tired. I just never felt like I caught up enough on my sleep. And that's because alcohol causes us to not really get any kind of restorative sleep, even just one drink.
Absolutely. And certainly women of this age are already feeling very fatigued. Lots of people are complaining of muscle aches and pains and joint pains. And, don't get me wrong, I absolutely am a big advocate for hormone replacement therapy, and it can be miraculous, but it's kind of nearly like by drinking, even though for all the benefits you're going to get with hormones and all the benefits to your mood and your fatigue levels and things, you're nearly counteracting it if you're then also drinking every evening. And I actually had a patient on Saturday, it was Friday. She showed me some before and after pictures. So she stopped drinking just over 3 months ago, and it was just the reduction in puffiness of her face. And it's something that I've seen so repetitively in patients, and it's just hard to pinpoint, but it's just very noticeable that alcohol definitely gives people this sort of generalized puffiness in their face. So, it's impacting everything from, your mental well-being, your ability to regulate your moods and not fly off the handle, to, having skin changes and a puffy face. And again, I look after a lot of women with skin conditions like rosacea that have been made worse by menopause, but rosacea is also very heavily connected to alcohol. It makes it worse a lot of the time. And, so again, these things are, when we're like trying to do all these treatments over here with skincare and lasers and all sorts of things, but then the person's still drinking, half a bottle of red wine every night. And it can just feel like we're going round in circles.
Absolutely. And I run women's alcohol-free challenges 4 times a year. And we usually have between sort of 600 and 800 women in them. And they all take a photo on day 1 and then a photo on day 30. And honestly, Shauna, the change in their face just in 30 days, like how much their skin is glowing, how much leaner their face is and healthier their skin looks, the puffiness goes, and their eyes are just bright and white and wide, and they just look so much healthier. And that's just 30 days of not drinking.
That's amazing. What about the drinkers so we've got like the nightly drinker, but what about the person who is an occasional binger, but it's like a big binge? Are they still considered a gray area drinker?
Yeah, absolutely. And in some ways, it can be worse to be a binge drinker for your body anyway, for your health, the health factors, because your body just wasn't designed to consume that much alcohol in one go. But anyone who is not in control of their drinking, whether that be they're having half a bottle of wine a night or they're having 2 bottles of wine in one sitting once or twice a week, it's still hugely problematic in terms of the health risks. But also, I know many binge drinkers who would say that's the only time that they feel like they have fun. And it can also be about starting to explore, well, what might my life look like without alcohol and where would the fun come from? Because we think that it won't be there, but it absolutely can be.
From your coaching experience, what do you think is the thing that surprises women most about what might change in their life when they cut back?
Biggest thing is their anxiety. Like within a week, they are just like, wow, I was drinking because of my anxiety, but removing the alcohol has been the thing that has had the biggest impact on my anxiety. So that is a very quick win that they get. And then what starts to happen is just they start growing in confidence, they feel like they've got more time, more mental clarity, and then that leads to them starting to be curious about what they might want to add into their lives if alcohol is not playing such a big role.
Here are my 3 takeaways from today's conversation with Sarah Rusbatch. Drinking habits are often emotional, not moral. Understanding why you reach for a glass matters more than judging that you do. Even small, normal amounts of alcohol can quietly affect your sleep, mood, and hormones. Midlife physiology simply changes the rules. And real change begins with awareness and compassion for yourself and for the women around you who might be quietly doing the same audit. What today's episode with Sarah really highlights is that most women's relationship with alcohol isn't about excess, it's about emotion. Stress, overwhelm, connection, they're all woven into that evening glass. But when we start asking why we drink, rather than judging that we do, things begin to shift. Understanding our habits is the first step towards changing them, and that change doesn't have to come from hitting rock bottom. It can come from simple curiosity. If you find yourself wondering how alcohol fits into your own life, or you'd like to support someone who's trying to make a change, I hope this episode has given you both understanding and permission to start that conversation. You'll find links to Sarah Rusbatch's Beyond Booze, her community programs, and alcohol-free resources in the show notes. If this episode resonated, please follow the show, share it with a friend, and leave us a voice note at allaboutyoupod.com/voicemail. I'd love to hear your questions for future episodes. And remember, this information is general in nature and not intended to replace personalized medical advice. Always speak to your healthcare provider for guidance about your own situation. I'm Dr. Shauna Watts, and I'll see you next time on All About You.